Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending. I can see people are still streaming into the webinar, so I'll just start slowly so people don't miss out on too much. My name is Adam Davey. I'm the CEO of the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. We're based in Canberra. So I'm presenting to you from Ngunnawal country. Apologies if the internet might be a bit laggy today. It is Monday and it's still warming up. I'm going to begin this information session with an overview of what Churchill Fellowship is all about and how you apply and what you're looking for. And then we have two Churchill Fellows, Zoe Eather and Robert Siemsen, who will be talking about their fellowship experience and giving you some insights into the amazing opportunity that a Churchill Fellowship presents. I would like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations people and the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to welcome any Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people who've tuned in today. A little bit of housekeeping. You will be able to submit questions via the Q&A function. And if you miss your chance, don't worry, you can get in touch with the Trust anytime through our website or our social media or even call the office. So don't feel pressure. We'll probably leave the majority of questions until the end. So, feel free to put questions up as we go or save it till the end. It's up to you. So I do have a few slides. I'm just going to share my screen now and we'll get underway. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the history of the Trust. I think that's important to understand. And quite often people are interested in where the funding comes from for Churchill Fellowships. So when Sir Winston Churchill resigned as British Prime Minister in 1955, he was aged 80 and he'd served under 5 reigning monarchs and survived 3 wars. He'd also been a writer, a journalist, an historian, an adventurer, a painter. He'd even won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. So as you can imagine, there was a widespread desire to honour Sir Winston and to capture the essence of his public service, his inspiration, his intellect and even his humour for generations to come. Now, we acknowledge that Sir Winston wasn't perfect, and you can read some insightful essays on our website that explore Churchill through a contemporary lens. But he certainly was someone who believed that anything was possible if you put your mind to it, and that the greatest figures in history were those who made a contribution to public service and to their fellow countrymen. So when Prime Minister Menzies announced the news of Sir Winston's death to the Australian public in January 1965, he simultaneously announced the launch of a public fundraising appeal to raise funds to establish the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust and effectively give life to Churchill Fellowships. On what we call Churchill Memorial Sunday, 28th of February 1965, a door-to-door appeal was launched, and now over 220,000 Australians participated in this with strong support from our Return Services League. And around $4 million, about £2.2 million was raised, and that still remains one of Australia's most successful one-day fundraising appeals in history. We do like to tell people that the banks opened on a Sunday to collect the funds. So you can imagine the degree of support from the community for this concept of Churchill Fellowships, allowing people from all walks of life to travel the world, learn new things and bring that back to Australia. So the attributes of a Churchill Fellow. Churchill Fellows are the types of people who are passionate and committed to an issue. They want to learn and share that knowledge so others in their community might benefit. If you're motivated about bringing about change and to improve outcomes for people or the planet, consider applying. What we're looking for are people with ideas they can implement on their return. People who are in a position to put the knowledge and skills that they gain overseas into action when they come back here to Australia. Now, Churchill Fellowship, it's a unique and prestigious opportunity open to Australians from all walks of life. So it's not an academic scholarship. You don't have to have had any particular educational qualification. You don't have to have even finished high school. And it's not a funding grant, so you're not required to remit and acquit all of the funds back to us at the end. It's a very empowering award to receive. It's much more than a study abroad opportunity. It's an opportunity to become an expert in your field. So it's not just an overseas trip, it's a start of a lifelong journey and your contribution to make Australia better. A Churchill Fellowship does not need to comprise formal research. So you can use a Churchill Fellowship to go overseas and learn new skills. And that might be from one particular place that you can only learn those skills, or it might be from several places. You can build networks and observe best practice in your chosen field. So a Churchill Fellowship is for overseas travel between 4 to 8 weeks in duration, and we ask you to take that in one continuous journey. There are some exemptions to this, which I'll talk about shortly. So we've awarded around 4,500 Churchill Fellowships since 1965 when we existed. And each year we aim to award around 100 more across the country. And so Churchill Fellows really do travel across the globe on the widest range and depths of topics. And they bring back to this country all sorts of things: information, networks, projects, products, ideas, and innovations. But all of those things have one thing in common. They're designed to improve their communities and to improve outcomes for their communities. So a bit on personal eligibility. You have to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident of Australia and aged 18 at the time of the application's close, which is 1 May this year. The ability to travel overseas is obviously essential, and we can provide support. For example, if you have a disability and you need a carer to go with you, we can support that. And we now also offer virtual research options for people who cannot travel. Again, it could be disability or caring responsibilities that prevent you from traveling overseas. So we do let you undertake virtual research. And that's using technology like this to have meetings. We've had some people do that during COVID when you couldn't travel internationally. And for some people and their projects, that was a really good solution. If you live in a very remote part of Australia, we will consider domestic travel. So you might be in a situation, although judging by the internet's going, you might not be online now in very remote Australia, where travel within Australia is going to still afford some benefits to you and your community because of the challenges of traveling within Australia. So if that's you, get in touch with us and we can talk to you a bit more about how that can work. Now, Churchill Fellowship is an individual project, it's not a team project. So if you're a part of a team and you're sitting here thinking, we're going to apply for a fellowship, well, no, you're going to apply for a fellowship, or someone on your team's going to apply, but it's not a team thing, it's an individual thing. That said, you know, more power to if you come back from your fellowship and you want to collaborate with your team and do great things, that's fantastic, but only one of you will be able to go on your fellowship. If you're undertaking tertiary studies, that's actually okay. However, you can't use your Churchill Fellowship to directly form part of that studies. You can't use a fellowship and the overseas travel as a key part of a master's or a PhD or something like that. It needs to be distinct from it. And the reason for that is we want you to be 100% focused and committed on your Churchill Fellowship, and particularly on your return, to be focused on how you're going to advance and implement your recommendations and disseminate and share your findings. So it is important to hear that a Churchill Fellowship is an opportunity for people from all walks of life. And that's not something that we say lightly. That's actually an organisational mantra for us. We really do encourage and want to see people from all different backgrounds, all different parts of Australia, all different sectors, industries, all sorts of topics. That's what's important to us. In terms of the topics and the project eligibility, your project obviously needs to be suitable for a Churchill Fellowship. Now that means that there has to be some benefit to the Australian community in you coming back and sharing your knowledge or your ideas, your practices or your skills. And you must be able to demonstrate that you've explored that topic fully in Australia to be considered. So you need to convince us that you need to travel overseas because you can't get that information or that knowledge that you're looking for in Australia. It's not here. They do things differently overseas and you need to experienced that. Your project has to be a self-contained project. I mentioned it can't be part of a university degree. It also can't be a sort of co-funded project where you have another organisation funding you to go overseas and you want to kind of top it up with a Churchill Fellowship. Again, we want you to be focused on the fellowship. It's an amazing opportunity, and we don't want you to, be distracted with other projects you're trying to do at the same time. You don't need to apply for a topic for your fellowship that directly relates to your employment. You may, and you probably will, because the majority of people do that. It makes sense because you'll be in a position to do something and influence your particular workplace or your field when you come back. However, that said, we do have people who apply and are awarded fellowships where their topic isn't directly related to their work. It might be something that they do outside of work. And as long as you can demonstrate that you are committed to that and you have opportunities to make the most of it and influence when you come back, then that's perfectly fine. So this is the beauty of a Churchill Fellowship. You really design your own project. I mean, I don't know now, anyone on this webinar, what your proposed topic's going to be. And I can tell you, we can't make up your project itinerary for you. You need to be the one coming up with that plan. So if you can think of a suitable topic, then really we don't have limits. We do offer some what we call sponsored Churchill Fellowships. And these are Churchill Fellowship opportunities that have come about either because someone has left a bequest to the trust or they've generously donated and sponsoring a fellowship, or it could be an organisation where they want to see research or people going overseas learning new skills in specific areas of interest to them that they think are important to the community. So for example, we have what's called the Auto Skills Australia Churchill Fellowship, which is really here to encourage people to do projects that will increase industry expertise and knowledge for the benefit of Australia's automotive sector, as broad as that can be. The A.V. Jennings Churchill Fellowship to investigate domestic architecture, building and planning, and the NRMA ACT Road Safety Trust Churchill Fellowship for contributions to research or policies leading to a reduction in deaths and suffering caused by road crashes. So there's some examples, and you can look on our website to see all of the different Churchill Fellowships that are sponsored that are available. But importantly, it doesn't matter if you don't select a sponsored fellowship. If your project aligns with one, we'll match it up. And similarly, if you do choose a sponsored fellowship in your application form, it doesn't rule you out from being considered for any other fellowships. So I wouldn't, I guess the take-home message there is don't spend too long worrying about it. So in terms of applying, applications open on 1 March. So you'll see the application form appear on 1 March and they close on 1 May. And you do apply online. Now, the best thing you can do is go to our website now and click on the menu option called Become a Fellow. There's so much information there that'll help you think about and prepare for applying for a Churchill Fellowship. It's really the best place to go. So if you haven't already had a look through there, please go and have a look at all the information we make available. Applications, you use this online system, you'll log in, you can save it, come back to it later. You've got quite a lot of time, obviously, with applications not closing until 1 May. Number one piece of advice is don't leave it to the last minute. It won't be your best application. So get in early, start thinking about it, planning for it, start your application early, maximize the opportunity you have to refine your application to be the best that it can be. If you can't use our online form for some reason, it might be you use a screen reader or something and it's not compatible, just contact us. We don't want someone to be ruled out from applying because they couldn't use our form. So please, if that's you, contact us immediately and we'll work out a solution for you. Now, it's important to remember you're competing against every other applicant. We normally get around 1,000 to 1,100 applications nationally a year. Remember, we aim to award around 100, so that's not bad odds, sort of 1 in 10, but it is competitive. So you need to be thinking about how will you convince the selectors to invest in you and your project idea. This year, we've added a 60-second video pitch as part of the process. You don't need any special tools, the laptop or phone you're using now, camera, microphone, that's all you need. And the idea there is to give you the chance to tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your project, why you think it's going to benefit the community. And that could really give you a good chance to put across in video what you can't put across in writing. And that may help you get across the line for an interview. You will need 2 references. So someone who can vouch for you and your personal characteristics, and someone who's an expert or an authority in your topic or field of your project who can vouch for your project being important. So another really important tip here is identify your referees early. Make sure they're going to be available. So you'll want them to look at your application, and it's all done through the system. You just put their details in, email, mobile number, and the system does the rest. We'll contact them and they'll put their reference into the system, but they will need to see your application, and it's probably a good idea to have a chat to them about what you're proposing ahead of nominating them. Well, one of the biggest disappointments applicants have is on the closing day, they call us and say, my referee hasn't provided the reference, and there's nothing we can do to help you at that point. So get in early, identify your referees, and spend time logging in and revising and refining your application, thinking about it. If you leave it to the last week, you just won't have the time to do that. So your itinerary, this is the exciting bit. Where you're going to go, which countries, which cities, which organizations, which people are you going to meet with, what do you want to learn from them, what do you want to get, what skills do you want to learn. That's the exciting bit that you need to put into your application. Remember, it's a 4 to 8 week opportunity to travel the world. What you don't want to do is put 16 countries down for a 4-week opportunity, because that's just not going to be feasible and it won't be a strong application. So limit, the destinations, those ones that are really exciting, really important. We also want to make sure that you have the best opportunity of being in other countries. So pad out some time in there so that you take advantage of the context you're in, that you get to understand the country and the culture, and also the unexpected meetings that will happen that you don't know are going to happen until you're there. So that's really an important tip. Don't cram your itinerary full. Just put the most important places in there and have a bit of space to allow you to enjoy the experience and take up opportunities. You are expected to have weekends like you would normally here, so that's important as well. You don't want to be exhausted on your fellowship and forget half what you learnt. This year we have changed our timing. So if you're successful this year, you'll find out in September, and we're for the first time bringing all of our fellows, newly awarded fellows, into Canberra for an onboarding session for 1 day on the 6th of October at this stage. We'll let you know when those details are finalised. And then you'll be able to travel from November onwards. You'll have 12 months from November this year, during which time you are expected to depart the country and begin your travel around the world. The selection process is fairly straightforward. We have panels and committees of selectors or assessors in each state and territory. We draw them from different industries and different sectors. So they're usually people with good experience in, whether it's health or agriculture or arts, whatever it might be. So applications are shortlisted based on the written application, and this year the 60-second video pitch, and then there'll be interviews held. In New South Wales and Victoria, because of the size of the population, there's 2 rounds of interviews. So, if you get a first interview, you might get invited back to a second interview. So the odds are, as I said before, are pretty good. Getting to an interview is a significant achievement. And yes, you can apply again if you're not successful. So not everyone gets a fellowship on their first attempt. Some people get it on their second or perhaps even their third application. And that doesn't necessarily mean applying every year. I've spoken to some people that have applied, maybe 3 times over a 10-year period, but, they're very focused on what they're doing, and each time they're just getting better and better at what they do, and the opportunity becomes clearer and clearer. So again, we're often asked for tips about the application process. And I think the best tip I can give you is read the selection criteria and address it. Use as little jargon as possible. So be clear and succinct. But if you start using jargon, it's going to be challenging for the people assessing your application to understand what you're talking about. And you don't want to make it difficult. You want to make it compelling and clear and easy to understand. So on that note, our selection criteria is effectively in two camps, the project and the person. So in terms of the project, ask yourself when you're writing your application, what's compelling about your project? Is there a burning platform? Like, why is now the best time to do it? Is it the right time for this project? Specifically, how will the new knowledge or skills you learn benefit others? So who will benefit from you doing this? Why will they benefit from doing it? And that can be quite broad. Sometimes people talk about the cultural benefits of someone coming back and learning a new skill, whether it might be in music or the arts or something like that. So it doesn't have to be something tangible, like come back and build a hospital. It can be anything, but you need to be able to articulate what that is. The itinerary, as I've said previously, you need to show the need to travel overseas. Otherwise, why would we send you overseas? Have a really clear focus. You don't know what you don't know, which is understandable, but you need to know who you want to meet with and why, what you think you might learn. So sometimes you can be really clear and say, I'll go there and learn X, Y, and Z. Other times it might be, look, I can see they're doing things, they're getting different results. I want to go and find out what that is. And that's perfectly fine. Just be really clear on why you've chosen those places, who you'll be speaking with and why. Now, a common question we get is, do I have to set up those meetings when I apply? No, you don't. So we certainly don't expect you to have contacted people overseas and organise meetings with them. But you just need to know quite clearly who it is you want to meet with and why. So if you're successful getting a fellowship, it's much easier to then approach those people in those organisations and lock your meeting in. You quite often find that a Churchill Fellowship itself will open doors and people say, oh, okay, so you've got this award, yes, we'll meet with you. Whereas if you approach them beforehand, they might not be so keen. So the other half of the selection criteria is the personal. So why you? How can you convince us that you're the right person to undertake this Churchill Fellowship project? How are you best placed to come back and implement change or influence others, or do something with what you learn? Some people say, I'll write an article in a professional journal, and we say that's not really enough for a $30,000 trip around the world. What we're expecting is you to come back and create a report, whether it's written or video or audio, however you do it, to share, your experience, your learnings, and importantly, your thoughts about, well, okay, I learned all this stuff in these other countries, and this is how I think we can do it in Australia, using those learnings, using those skills, and then for you to pursue that change. So that might be something you do yourself. It might be an influence you need to achieve in an organization or a system, introducing a new policy, whatever it might be. That's what we want to see from you. And so that needs to be really clear in your application. And if you get an interview, you need to convince us that you're going to do something with this wonderful opportunity. So remember, it's a very competitive process. Churchill Fellowships are prestigious, they're well funded, and they're highly contested, but that's no reason to be shy. It's a reason to put forward the best effort you can into your application. So I'll say it again, start your application early, spend time on it. Don't try and rush it out in the last week. You will be competing against everyone else who lodges an application, and I'm sure they'll all do a good job. So it's up to you to make your application stand out. The Churchill Trust team here in Canberra are available to provide advice, answer your questions in a timely manner, and you can contact us, on the phone if you want to have a chat, through our website. If you look at our website, search through the different Churchill Fellows, they're all listed on there. If there's someone you'd like to talk to who maybe works in a similar area, we've got a contact form. You can approach them through that contact form on our website as well. And it's rare for a Churchill Fellow not to want to help someone with some advice and share their experience. So I'm just going to finish up. You'll see shortly a poll come up on your screen. We'd like you to let us know, which state or territory you're from and where you heard about this session. That'll be really helpful information for us as we organise more sessions. So on that note, I'm going to now introduce our first speaker of the evening, Zoe Eather. Zoe is an experienced Churchill Fellow and engineer who specialises in smart communities. That's using different ways of thinking and technology as enablers to make the places we live in more accessible, livable and sustainable. And the combination of Zoe's engineering background and her ability to explain and engage in complex topics in a friendly and informative way allows her to offer future thinking, useful and realistic strategic advice, which is what Zoe does. So I'm going to let Zoe tell us all about her Churchill Fellowship experience. Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. I will just share my screen. So my name is Zoe Eather. I'm the CEO of My Smart Community, which is my own boutique consultancy. And actually, I just had started my consultancy and my podcast, which I'll talk a little bit about later, the month that I got my Churchill Fellowship, which was in April of 2018. So it was a busy month. But actually, I'd like to start by telling you a story. So when I was on my Churchill Fellowship, I happened to be in Amsterdam at the time, and I was talking to some really amazingly passionate people at this sustainability event or circular economy event. We were standing there, we're looking out over the canals, the soft light is streaming in. It was just beautiful. It was a tough life back then in 2019. But we were talking, and I was telling them where I'd gone to, and when I said that I'd been to Mexico City, one guy pipes up and he's like, "Oh, do you know what the biggest problem they were having there on the metro?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." And he said, "It only affects women." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, safety, I guess." And he said, "Well, yes, but maybe not in the way you're thinking." And I was like, "Okay, tell me more, tell me more." He said they'll have this really big issue with women giving birth on the floor of the train carriages. And I thought, wow, oh my goodness, like these poor women, they're obviously trying to get to the hospital. The metro is their only form of transportation. You know, it's crowded, it's delayed. And as we know, babies just come whenever they're ready. And he said, well, that's what the government thought as well. But actually, it was happening so regularly that they had to investigate. So they collected their data, they asked the women involved. And as it turns out, the women were actually choosing to go to the metro station and get on the train when they were due to give birth, when they were about to give birth. And I thought, why would anyone do this? And apparently, according to my Dutch friend, when you buy a ticket for the metro station, it's only a couple of pesos. You also get health insurance for the duration of your journey. And I thought, wow, these women are so clever. And I thought, well, what did they do about this? You know, the government could have done a number of different things, changed the policy, you know, sent the women away, etc., etc. But according to my Dutch friend, he said, actually, no, they put midwives and nurses onto the train carriages to ensure that everyone had a safe journey. And I thought, wow, the future of transport, meeting the real needs of the community. Now, even if that story, according to my Dutch friend, is not 100% true, that message is still quite clear. If we think about how we can really focus in on the people, then we can have very different conversations to the past. And this is the topic of my Churchill Fellowship, which was accelerating smart mobility into our communities. And I'll show you where I went, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that as well. So I was a bit crazy, let's be honest. I went to 9 countries in 9 weeks. At the time, that was okay. And I was researching smart mobility. So what does smart mobility actually mean? For me, it's about using technology and data as enablers to help us move around. But it's not just about moving around, it's about the communities we live in. So I started in Toowoomba. I went to these 9 different countries, and I met with so many different amazing people. And what I wanted to do is really see how each of these places was tackling kind of a smart city or a smart mobility approach. And what that meant is people at different levels. You know, you look at Amsterdam, you know, we know there's amazing transport networks there, but then I also wanted to go to Cape Town because they were doing some really innovative stuff around kind of minibus taxi things and those kind of informal transport and how technology could be used to help with those. And then and Seoul, for example, I went to a what did I go to? Electrification conference, so all about electric vehicles and how the island in Seoul, or off Seoul rather, or off Korea, called Jeju Island. They were trying to be 100% electric by 2030 or something along those lines. So lots of different things. And then in America, went to a few different places as well. And I'll show you some photos from each of those. But what I did, and when I applied for my fellowship, I worked in the space of autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, and smart cities. So essentially, how do we use technology? And I know I've said this a few times, but it's not just the technology itself and the technology and data, but it's actually how does it improve life for people? So really thinking first about the people and then the technology application that goes on top of that. I am an engineer by background, transport engineer, and the way that I came into this space was that I had this really amazing opportunity to live and work in South Korea for 3 months. And that's when I learned about this smart city thing. And then when I came back to Australia after that stint, I was working in autonomous vehicles. And I was working for the government at the time, but I really wanted to broaden out further. And so I left my good, secure government job to start a podcast, which is called the Smart Community Podcast. And of course, you can't eat passion forever. So then I started my consultancy at the same time. And also in that month, as I mentioned, I applied for my Churchill Fellowship. So I won't go through all of these because I know this is very specific to my topic, but just to show you a bit of flavor, this is basically a table of contents of my report. I talked about these different things about mobility, and I wanted to really look at not what was necessarily happening around the world, but look at the gaps. So what are the things we weren't talking about enough? And so these are the topics that I came up with. So we weren't talking about regional mobility, for example, and holistic mobility, or who are we actually planning for, those type of things. And this photo here is from Amsterdam. So just to show you a little bit, I had a great time. I went to the Harry Potter theme park in Orlando on one of my weekends. That first photo is from Mexico City. I had a really amazing time there. I met with so many different types of people, and the way that I actually set up my itinerary, which you might be thinking, oh my God, how would I know, who am I going to meet with? I was fortunate because I had the podcast, so I was able to reach out to those people on the podcast, but that's when I started forming my itinerary, but also good old Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever your preference, have a look, and because you're working in this space, you're the expert in this space, you'll know, right? And it's like Adam said, you don't have to set up your meetings first. You just want to really put together an itinerary that is really compelling, and then you work out the meetings after you're awarded the fellowship. And also, as Adam said, can completely vouch for, you say you're a Churchill Fellow, that, doors open. It will take some time, and you're the one that will drive all of this. So this is your adventure, but really don't let that scare you off, because it's such an amazing opportunity. Just some other fun things. Have fun on the way as well, because that's really important. At the bottom photo there of the people in the tower, this is in Barcelona. I met this really amazing lady who runs Smart City conference over there, and she invited me one weekend to join her family to go to one of these competitions. So really, really kind of local experience, and that was just amazing. Yeah, really, really great. And I just, as I was putting this presentation together, I got some, really great feels coming back to my Churchill Fellowship, which when I went on my fellowship, it was 2019, I went from March to May. The reason I chose March to May, there was a couple of conferences that I wanted to go to, but also the weather was good. So think about that, because it's important. Now, moving on from the fellowship, and really happy to answer any questions as we go through. I think we're going to save those to the end. But since my fellowship, here's just a couple of things that I've been able to do. So in 2020, I spoke at the North Carolina Transportation Summit. And again, I was invited there as off the back of my Churchill Fellowship. So someone just found me on LinkedIn. They saw my fellowship. I think I'd submitted my report. earlier in 2019, and they found that they saw that I was a presenter speaker, that I was a speaker, and they just messaged me, and that was a paid opportunity to go to North Carolina, and I ran a workshop, conveniently called the name of my Churchill report, which was all about smart mobility, integrating it into our communities. So that was just one opportunity that came from that. Also in 2019, right after my fellowship, and again, I applied for another opportunity, but being a Churchill Fellow, that really then adds to I guess, your reputation of being somebody who is good at then sharing information about what, or promoting the things that you're involved in or the awards that you're involved in and that type of thing. So I was part of the Australian Smart City Young Leaders, Australian Asian program, I think it was called, and it was run by the Australian government, speaking in Saudi Arabia recently, earlier, around this time last year, ITS, so Intelligent Transport Systems Summit, which I was on the panel with my old colleagues that I used to work with, and then just other opportunities, Adelaide, so many different things. And the Churchill Fellow, really, that Churchill, having that really then helped me kind of, be a platform to then step to the next level. Another thing I've been able to do is I was the technical reviewer of the Smart Cities for Dummies book. This is the author here, Jonathan Reichenthal, who's very well known in the space. So that was a really amazing opportunity over COVID, and just doing more work in autonomous vehicles and for the government now as my consultancy, now contracting directly to the government and to other larger organizations as well. And yeah, I've been doing some work down in Sydney, in New South Wales. So lots of remote work actually since the pandemic, but yeah, really amazing opportunities. And then being able to apply my lessons from my Churchill Fellowship directly to the work that I do today. I think that's all I had. Feel free to contact me there, but I'll hand back over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Zoe. Every time I see that human tower, I get a bit scared by thinking of the people on there, and it's quite an impactful image. Great to hear about your experience, and I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end. So I'll now say goodbye for a moment and introduce Robert Siemsen, who is a classically trained coach builder who recently started his own business to offer traditional body making skills here in Australia. And the work of the business is based on what Robbie saw and practiced in England while working there and completing his Churchill Fellowship. If you haven't read his report, I would recommend having a look. There's some pretty fantastic imagery in there. It really gives you a good sense of what he does and what opportunities he had in the UK. So Robbie will always be committed to bringing the principles of speed and fine craftsmanship of that era forward to today. So over to you, Robbie.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much. So yes, my Churchill Fellowship, I've proof of it right here. It's my award. Was about furthering my understanding in the craft of traditional coach building, which is the manufacturing of sports car bodies, aluminium and steel car bodies, and the spiritual home of this trade really is in England, where Rolls-Royce and Aston Martin, AC cars all started pushing out panel beaded aluminium bodies. So I went over to England in a very small section of England, from London to Birmingham. It's the whole trade is pretty much in that one spot, in Coventry, where the automotive industry was. So I just hung around there for 3 months, and some of the highlights really, when I was in England, the Ashes were on, and I couldn't stay out of the pubs, just heckling the English, and but I joke, but like going over there, I got to meet my heroes, and it sounds cliche, but blokes that I've looked up to since I was a teenager. Clive Smart, Darren Welsh, Gary Yates. I got to meet them all and work with them for 2 or more weeks. And it's everything I thought it would be. It met all my expectations. And it was just such a rewarding experience that as I've moved forward in my trade, sorry about that. As I've moved forward, it's something that I've always referenced back to. The confidence that I gained out of working with the best, because I've seen the best, I know what it looks like. So I'm constantly comparing myself to that, and it's helped me grow from 2018 or 2019 when I went over to England. And one of the things that really sticks with me is I was working in a shop in Chapman Classic Panels. Luke Chapman owned the place, and his father Brian. And they thought, we've got this sort of Australian exchange student with us. Let's introduce our families to this bloke. And I was working in this place, backed onto a canal, and it was the dankest, grottiest place. Extraordinary work coming out of there, but it had rats, and Luke had a BB gun. So I was working away, and you'd sort of spot this vermin out of the corner of your eye. You would slowly pick up the BB gun and try and get the rat. And so the whole family came over, and just instead of talking to me, they just got to witness this Australian shooting vermin. And it sticks with me, and I bring it up because the most rewarding thing I got was forming great friendships with these blokes. I didn't just go over and just use them for their knowledge. I really became good friends with them, and I still speak to all of them all the time, constantly. As I've opened the business, emailing them saying, hey man, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What should I do? How do I wheel this up? How do I make things? And just that mentorship that I've gained from half a dozen masters of the craft has hurdled me into it's furthered my craft so much more than what I'd ever sort of anticipated. And the formal arrangements, so you'll book into these meetings when you travel, but for me it was that the informal meetings and the informal arrangements that I got, just messaging someone or bringing them. There was an Australian working in Newport Pagnell in England that I'd ring up and say, "G'day Daniel, my name's Robert. I'm over here on this fellowship. Why don't we go and have a beer?" And then I would go and have a beer with him, and he became one of my best mates over there. Always catching up with him. He works for Aston Martin. He got me into Aston Martin. One of the first places I went to, Carl Neville, I got to know his whole family. He was constantly checking up on me, and I just had this community around me. And because I wasn't jetting all over the world, just in this one place, I got to just meet everyone's family, and the friendships I've gained out of it has been incredible. Not being treated as a tourist, as a friend, and having that friendship with them. They're happy to share their knowledge. You have that trust there. And if you go into my report, the photos are really personal photographs. And I wouldn't have been able to capture that stuff without just forming those friendships first. So achieving things when I come back home. My biggest achievement by far is starting the business with everything that I've learned. Everything that I learned in England, and the way they work there is very specific, but it's very simple, and that's not having that huge capital has allowed me to, buy simple equipment and just work with my hands and not have that output of cash at the start. And the business has just grown organically from the work that I put out there. Let me just get my train of thought here. And right, so the benefiting the industry, and I have some social media channels, putting lots of photographs up there to try and share some of the work that I do. And the Australian community, a lot of blokes who want to do this, but can't sort of fathom the cost of it up front, have looked into my workshop and thought, like Robert I don't have very fancy equipment. Some 4-foot kit. This is technical jargon, but really cheap equipment that I've just sort of scrounged around and bought. But it's the hand skills that project the work. So it's just opened up doors for people that they haven't really seen in Australia. Most of the workshops in England were all, dilapidated milking sheds, terrible. Like I mentioned, the ones with rat-infested places, but the work coming out of them, the space was irrelevant. And in Australia, I think blokes really go for that high-end industrial unit because it's kind of all there is here. But I, on the other hand, have gone these, again, like dilapidated freight docks. And I've had that out of everything that I've done, that's the most feedback I've had, is just people thinking, no, you don't need the luxurious industrial unit. Like, look at what Robert's doing. And I don't mean to beat my own drum with that, but it's just the most feedback I've had. And I think that is benefiting the industry as a whole. A couple other things. I have a couple of employees now who, I pay them, so that's benefiting their lives, doing what they love, and also like liaising with the TAFE systems, going in there, just meet and greets and a little bit of teaching, but a lot of liaising and kind of just showing the teachers a thing or two, and they're all great blokes, and I really, really enjoyed doing that. And I think that's a bit of a leadership position, which I think all Churchill Fellows should strive to be that leader in their field. The best thing about being a fellow, I think for me, it was the push it gave me to make sure that I was achieving something. It gave me that little bit of extra drive while I was over in England. I was feeling a bit tired, but I thought, no, I got to keep pushing. I have this responsibility. So I think having that behind you and the trusts, that community really pushing you along is, for me, it was the best part of being a Churchill Fellow. Also going over there, not just being Robert Siemsen, but Robert Siemsen, Churchill Fellow. I'm here doing a Churchill Fellowship. Kind of takes the weirdness out of way of emailing someone randomly and saying, oh, hi, can I come and meet you? I'm a Churchill Fellow. So I think that is one huge benefit that I got out of it. And also the documenting my experience in the report, and I kept a diary. Like I said before, that mentorship, it's something that I always come back to. I try not to stray too far from it, because these guys, they were the best. There's been little changes in my business, but I try and keep it as I saw in England. I try and stay true to that, what I saw in my fellowship. And so how to prepare for the application? Just give yourself plenty of time. And what Adam said earlier with the references, get onto that early and make sure they're good references, maybe leaders in the field. I had the fellow I worked for was a Churchill Fellow. He put me onto the whole thing, so I got him as a reference. And a leader, again, Stuart Stendhal in coachbuilding. He's a real god. So I got two really good references, and they wrote me beaming references showing my commitment. I've been doing it since I was 15 years old, so I really try to get that to shine through, which leads me to my one piece of advice, which is don't consume yourself with Churchill Fellowship content. Obviously, do a little bit of reading, but if you lose that personal pitch, I think it would be a huge shame, because as Adam said, there's 2 interview processes, which I fumbled my way through. But in the second one, there was a question directed at me saying, like, why do you just want to go to England? There's automotive industries in America and in Italy. And I said, like, England is the only place in the world where businesses have been open for 40 plus years. So they must be doing something right. And I need to learn what they're doing so I can go forward economically to figure out the economics behind the business, which is that simplicity that I learned over there. And I saw everyone's head, nod, yeah, this guy is authentic. My commitment to the trade came through, and I just would plead to everybody to keep that passion authentic and don't kind of buy into the jargon. And being a fellow, it requires a lot of time and commitment. And when I was over there, I really pushed myself as hard as I could without having that bounce come out of my bungee. But I really, really ripped in, and I really went hard. I kept that diary every night. I wrote in the diary to make sure like everything was sinking in. Even after nights at the pub, I would come home, I would get almost everything that I could into the laptop. And when I came home, I sort of had all the mental notes there. So that really helped me a lot. I hope after all this, so I'll wrap it up now, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have. And I'd like to hand it back over to Adam. If I could, that would be great.
No, good job, Robert. Really appreciate that. And yeah, authenticity, I think, is so critical and so core to the application process. So that's a spot on piece of advice. So that's our 2 presenters, and I might ask Robert and Zoe to turn your cameras back on. We've got a few questions. Some of them are directed towards you. Some are probably more administrative ones for me. So the first one is there an expectation that I'll take leave from work, and how do people usually manage that? So from the trust perspective, look, I guess in my experience with what I see all the time is that it depends. So it depends on, if you're self-employed, if you work for a small employer, a large employer, it's different. So a lot of people take personal, like their rec leave or long service leave. Some people's employers give them some leave. Some people's employers give them the whole time off as paid leave because they can see the benefit that it's going to come to them in doing it. So what we do with the Churchill Fellowship is we fully fund your fellowship. So you get airfares, your travel's covered. We give you a living allowance to cover your food, incidentals, accommodation. But obviously, you need to sort that out with your employer if you need to take leave from there. So Zoe or Robert, you might have something you can add to how you handled that.
If your boss doesn't give you time off, quit your job. Just get out of there as quickly as possible. My boss actually, he gave me 3 months off and lost a bit of momentum, and I didn't have a job to come back to. And I knew that going to England, but it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So don't let anything stop you from going. That would be my good. I mean, ask for time off. That's the best thing. But if they say no, I mean, honestly, you should go anyway.
That's a big vote of support for the fellowship. Zoe.
Yeah, I went for myself, and I really planned it out, I suppose. And the other thing, like you get your, and I'm not sure if it works the same now, but when we did it, basically your ticket gets paid for and then the rest you get in cash. Is that still the same kind of? Yep. So you can plan that out. I did like contract to a larger organization at the time, and I just let them know really early that this is what I'm going to do. And it was actually quite good because they're a global organization and I didn't work, but as I went around, they actually introduced me to other people and I met them in offices and things like that. So, and also, yeah, if you can kind of explain if it is relevant to your organization, you can explain that as well. And then, maybe you do talks at your company when you come back and stuff like that as well. But just get in early and have that conversation. And as Robert said, it's an amazing once in a lifetime opportunity that's really driven by you. And so, yeah, don't let anything kind of stop you if you can avoid it. I know obviously some things you can't avoid, but yeah, it's a really amazing opportunity that you won't want to miss. And I hope that your employer would also see that as well.
Yep. So I think it's good advice. Talk early to your employer. Sometimes I might say, look, come back and see me if you get it. But get that conversation happening early because, nothing worse than being awarded a fellowship than faced with that question of how am I going to do it? Do I quit my job? Because not everyone can afford to do that, obviously. So good advice there. Is it a deal break if you can't make the onboarding session in October? Also, can the interviews be done by Zoom or are they only in person? So interesting question. I'm not going to assume that you're overseas, but just does make me kind of react to say, if you can't make the interview because you're overseas, if you can't make the onboarding because you're overseas, that's probably not the message you want to hear in terms of us giving you an opportunity to travel overseas that you might not otherwise get. So not saying that's the case, the person asked the question, but if anyone thinking you're going to be overseas a lot and it's going to be really hard to apply for a fellowship, you probably don't need the fellowship, would be my kind of thought. Might not be accurate, but that's kind of the reaction. So no, it won't be a deal breaker. We can do Zoom interviews if need be. There's a whole range of reasons why people might need a Zoom interview. Living hundreds of kilometers away from where it is, all that sorts of things. So look, and sometimes people will be traveling for whatever reason. So that's not a deal breaker, no, but we'd love to see you attend if you can. So this one I think is for you, Zoe. How did you get associated with the programs and events in Australia that you spoke about?
Oh yeah, great question. So I have quite a big presence on LinkedIn. That's where I, during my fellowship, which I actually didn't mention, I basically every couple of days or whenever I moved in a place every week, I would then post that on LinkedIn, post, the top 3 things. Doesn't have to be a massive thing. Sometimes I make little videos, sometimes I make little graphics, that type of thing. And so LinkedIn is where I hang out and promote through there. But then also reach out, you can reach out to conferences and events online as well. I assume that's what we're talking about, speaking at events and that type of thing. So it is a build, but with that Churchill Fellowship, that really helps you.
Great, thanks, Zoe. Someone was asking if there's a set distribution of categories that fellowships are allocated to. So as you know, we kind of break it into, health and arts and whatever, agriculture. No, not really. Obviously, we want to ensure we're awarding across the depth and breadth of issues that are important to people in Australia, but we don't allocate a certain number. So you will see from year to year, depending on what emerging issues there are in our communities, that might be more in one particular kind of area, but really no, we don't. So we would hate dearly to miss out on awarding someone a fellowship on an amazing project because we said, sorry, we've got 10 already. That would be sad. So we don't do that. Zoe, can you unpack a little more how much of the plan you'd worked out beforehand and how much you worked out after? So they're kind of thinking about how much detail they need up front.
Yeah, great question. So I did the full itinerary. I was a bit stressed about it if I was like, oh, well, what if I can't get that, person, or what if I can't get into that organization? But that was okay. Like I had the intention, I knew what I was going, well, I assume, like, you don't have to know exactly what you're going to learn, as Adam said earlier, but I went, oh, well, they're doing this project and this is what I would like to get out of that. It changed. Like, let's be honest, it changed. still the same kind of theme, obviously, and you know, most of my you know, the countries didn't change too much. I think maybe one or two did, because I had a lot and where I was going to, but yeah, it did change. So don't worry so much. You have to have a lot of detail, but the detail, when we say a lot of detail, it's like, and I can't recall exactly, but it's, you know, it's saying this country, this organization, potentially a person, but I don't think that's 100% necessary. Is that right? And then what you want to gain out of that as well. So there is a lot of work in kind of, you know, tailoring that, twisting that, but it can change. So don't fret too much on that. But yes, it will take.
We ask for half a week blocks. So in your itinerary, when you're sending out the application, it'll be like half a week blocks. So going to Germany, to this place in those blocks. But like you heard from Robert, you can be also like super zoned in and focused with a good reason. I want to go here to this country, and that's what I'm doing, and these are the places. We have fellows go to one place. You know, I'm going to Italy, I'm doing this course, and I'm learning about Italian patisserie. So we've got one of those coming up. And that's perfectly fine if you have a good reason for it. So someone has asked if there's a word or page count or requirement or guidance for the application. So I think, as you might have missed at the start, if you go to our website, churchillfellowships.com.au, there's a section called Become a Fellow. There's a big button up the top. That's got all the information you need. And there is an application guide in there, and it'll unpack all the secrets of what you need in terms of details, the kind of questions we ask. There is a word, or actually a character count. And a lot of people say that's the hardest thing because they want to like blah, lots of stuff. And it's like, sorry, you've only got, you know, 300 characters. So you need to learn how to get that down, maybe do it in a Word document or something first, and then, you know, chisel it down, maybe get someone to help you and say, can you help me, you know, get this down more succinctly. And also the related question, if you have two different project ideas in two different areas, would you recommend putting them both in so the assessors can determine which is most aligned? I would say not, because you're going to come across a whole bunch of competitors applying who are really clear, as you just heard from these two tonight, on what they want to do. If you come and kind of hedging your bets, going, well, I got this project and this idea and this one over here, you're not really going to be compelling. So I think you do yourself a disservice if you tried to cram two into one, if that makes sense. Someone's asking and commenting, it's great, there's no need for academic qualifications, but asking if academics, like lecturers or professors with PhDs who want to make a difference and bring impact to Australia apply. Look, absolutely they do apply, and they do get awarded. So I think probably in my view, maybe a little disproportionately higher than the average population. We get a lot of doctors doing it. So we're not saying we don't want them, absolutely happens. And that's when we say all walks of life, that's what we mean, every end of the spectrum. I think one year we were promoting using the marketing term or phrase from plumbers to professors, and that's what we mean. So hopefully that satisfies that question. Robert, people like your idea of keeping the journal. It's a good idea.
Yes,
how many
definitely.
recommendation letters are required? So again, I'd say go to that Become a Fellow page. There's 2 referees, they're not letters. So don't get someone to write your letter and send it in. They're going to need to go through the process. You nominate your referees in the application form. They'll get an email and a text message, and they'll then be able to type their, we have questions, we ask them. Now again, on the website, Become a Fellow page, I keep saying that because it's important. There is a document on there, you can see what your referee is going to be asked as well. So it's really important to follow the process. Now, someone's asking for a bit of advice on how to decide which to apply through between 2 categories where the project would overlap between the 2. Okay, so what we do is we have 7 categories that you can apply in: health, arts, whatever, education, whatever it is. That's really for us more than you, so that we can ensure that our assessors, our selectors, we're giving the best chance for your application to be assessed by the right people. So if you think, oh, it's health or it could be arts, just choose one, don't sweat over it. If our assessors get it and go, oh, we think this is more arts, you know, they'll give it to the arts panel if they think they're going to give you a better assessment. So yeah, don't worry about that. And frankly, in our smaller states, we don't have the separate panels, so it's the whole committee looking at it anyway. It also helps us get a bit of a sense as applications come in, where applicants think they're coming from, so we can understand if we are appealing to people and getting applications from people across all the different sectors. So it's more for us than you. All right, and that actually does bring us to the end of all the questions. This session's recorded, so if you came in late or you want to go over it again, you'll be able to. Want to give a big thanks to Zoe and to Robert for giving your time. Really appreciate it. Churchill Fellows always give back. We try not to take advantage of it, but thank you so much for that. And on that note, good night.